give up. Will you donate today to help us keep standing against every new attack? We'll give you access to the online video AFA at Home Spiritual Warfare. Visit afaaction.net, and thanks in advance. afaaction.net.
Welcome to today's issues. Join us for the next hour as we offer a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And welcome to today's issues. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman this week. I am joined in studio by Fred Jackson.
Good morning.
And hey, how's Canada doing? You still have family up there, right?
I still have family there. In fact, I'm going home for a visit in a couple of weeks.
Oh,
looking forward to it.
Good.
And yes, it does not snow in August. I have a story to tell.
Yeah.
There have been tourists in July who go to Canada.
Yeah.
And they bring their snow skis.
Oh, come on.
No, I'm not kidding.
Well, then they get what they deserve.
Well, and they stop and ask, where's the snow?
Wow.
And people say, well, come back in January and we'll have some for you.
That's, listen, I don't want to call people stupid, especially people if I don't know them. But that's just dumb.
Well, it's it just kind of, when stories are mentioned about Canada, most often here in the United States,
it's winter vortex.
It's a cold front from Canada. It's the Arctic blast.
Yes.
That sort of. So there's just an assumption. Wait a minute, it must be really cold there all the time.
I just think it's like the North Pole. That other laugh you heard is Chris Woodward.
Yes.
Good morning, Chris.
Thank you very much. I will say my parents took me to Canada in the very early 90s, and this is like before dial-up internet was starting to get in many homes or whatnot. We didn't really know what Canada was going to be like. It was during the summer. So we packed jeans and sweatshirts and stuff like that, and we got up to the Canadian side of Niagara Falls, and it was the hottest day on record in Niagara Falls. It was 93 degrees.
Oh, man.
And here we are with, like, winter gear. Yeah.
So you guys are kind of the people we're talking about.
Exactly. That story touched. I felt it.
Well, at least you had the excuse of there not being any internet.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, how in the world you go to another country and not check and see what the weather's going to be like?
Yes,
is beyond me. So.
And why they weren't stopped at the border with snow skis on their roof?
Well, I'm here for the snow. Okay. Well, do you mind if we do a background check?
That's right.
I will say, too, I didn't know about I was like a kid, so I didn't know about exchange rates and stuff like that. And we stopped at this place, and my dad gave me some money and said, go give this to the lady in the box, and she'll give you some Canadian money. Well, I gave her like $25 U.S., and I remember as I was walking away counting the money she gave me, I had like $36 Canadian, and I was like, I'm not going to tell her. So I'm back. I'm a little kid, right? I didn't know Jesus at that time. So anyway, we're in the back of the van, and finally, like, stupid pride or something, I'm bragging about a stepbrother back there.
Okay.
Hey, I got more back than I gave her. And my dad was like, it's called an exchange rate, you idiot.
Now, folks, for you who are listening, we do not advocate the use of insults when dealing with your children.
No.
Okay? We're not saying it's a good thing to call your son an idiot, even though in this case he was.
He meant it with love. He meant it with love.
He meant it with love.
Yes.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
We've put it off long enough. It's time to get It's time to get to the news.
You're gonna make me bring it down.
Yep.
Here we go, America. Let's begin with this because Fred has posted a video of President Biden and his remarks last night from the White House, and he had a lot to say. Many people were kind of half expecting him to say it. I will resign the presidency effective at noon tomorrow or something like that. He did not. He went on to say that, he is going to remain president. He put out an agenda. I can get into that a little bit. But to give you an idea of kind of how he began the speech last night from the Oval Office, clip one.
In recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation. You know, there is a time and a place for long years of experience in public life. But there's also a time and a place for new voices, fresh voices, yes, younger voices. And that time and place is now. I hope you have some idea how grateful I am to all of you. The great thing about America is here, kings and dictators do not rule, the people do.
That was one of the things he went on to say many times for about the 11.5-minute speech was this is about saving democracy and saving democracy. He kept repeating that phrase because that's one of the things they're using against Trump is he's a dictator, we're about freedom.
Well, the Trump is a dictator argument is absurd, but I don't want to get into that right now, Fred. My question for President Joe Biden is if you think it's time for new voices and a new generation and passing the torch, then why did you run for re-election?
Yes.
I mean, what's changed in the last 6 months that made you suddenly realize that you're too old and you want young people to take your place? Because his argument and the Biden administration is making this argument. It has nothing to do with what we saw on the night he had the debate fiasco.
Yes. What you just heard in that 65-second clip, roughly, from Joe Biden last night is what's called political spin.
Right.
All right? Here's the reality. Joe Biden did want a second term.
I bet he still wants it.
Yes, he wanted it desperately. And the reason he had that speech last night, what's behind that? His own party turned against him. Because his own party is all about power.
Right.
And they saw that they had a flawed candidate. They were willing to give him a chance right up until that debate on the 27th of June. And they understood that night was the end of the charade. The American people saw what they have seen bits and pieces of, but they saw a manifest of where Joe Biden is in his mental abilities. And so that marked the whole change. A few weeks before the debate, he was in Hollywood. Hollywood was just all behind him. They wrote checks for millions of dollars. After that debate, remember what George Clooney did? Wrote an editorial in the New York Times.
Yep.
And wrote and in that New York Times editorial said he checked with Barack Obama. It was the night of the long knives.
Right.
His own party turned against him. He had no choice. He had the meetings with Chuck Schumer, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. Nancy Pelosi, who has been an ally of Biden, turned against him. He did not have any friends left in the Democratic Party. And so they made a deal with him. I think the deal is we let you stay on for 6 months as president. You name Kamala Harris as your replacement, and we'll do all that we can to talk about what a great statesman you've been for 50 years, and you'll go out with a little bit of pride. But the reason he made that speech last night, the real reason is that he wanted that second term, but his party said, no, Joe, no, we're not going to allow it.
What's reprehensible about the circumstances and the situation that you have laid out, and I absolutely agree with your perception of what's happened. What's reprehensible, though, is that the Democratic Party leaders only changed their mind when what the Democratic Party leaders knew was true became obvious to everyone else.
Yes.
So they didn't mind that a Joe Biden who was incapable of handling a second term, they didn't care that he was incapable of handling it. Yeah. They only cared that the American people suddenly understood that.
Yes.
And that's what is sinister about this whole thing. Listen, political parties can choose whomever they'd like to be their standard bearer. I understand that. But the reasoning behind this decision is not, hey, we care what happens to the country. I guess maybe they would say we can't have Trump in the White House, so we'll do whatever it takes. But they knew that the man that they were supporting up until, what was it, June
27th.
June 27th,
Mhm.
they knew that the man that they were going to try to put in the White House was incapable of handling the job. So they really didn't care about what happens to the country.
Nope.
Just as long as their guys stayed in power.
That's right.
In related news, I have a couple of clips here from former President Donald Trump, who obviously wants to be back in the White House. Trump had a rally last night in Charlotte, North Carolina. Huge crowd. They played Lee Greenwood again. I hope Lee Greenwood gets paid every time that song plays, because that man has sung it a lot over the years, and it's been played somewhere in these United States. But anyway, Trump, he talked on a number of topics, and he did address the issue of President Biden and his, I guess, successor or presumptive successor, Kamala Harris. Clip 3.
As you know, 3 days ago, we officially defeated the worst president in the history of our country, crooked Joe Biden. So now we have a new victim to defeat, Lion Kamala Harris, Lion, L-Y-I-N apostrophe. The most incompetent and far-left vice president in American history.
Now, he stayed on point again this morning because Trump was on Fox and Friends for a very lengthy interview. And listeners, do check our Facebook page because I will share the link to that entire segment here in just a moment. Here's what Trump said today about Biden's speech. Clip 11.
I watched the speech last night, and look, the amazing thing is you look at the other networks, they say, oh, wasn't that a wonderful speech? Wasn't he wonderful? It was terrible. It was like a terrible speech and terrible delivery. He looked like he was having problems. And yet you watch the other networks and you would think he was Ronald Reagan in his prime, Winston Churchill in his prime. And he wasn't. It was not good. It was not a good speech. The look, the sound, the voice, everything. And it's so phony what's going on. I mean, the press is it's so fake.
Well, Fred, I think that we are going to continue to see, you remarked in our story meeting this morning about the crowd that heard former President Trump last night. The enthusiasm for him, for him, I'm not sure can be matched even with Kamala Harris. The newness and the freshness, and hey, let's all get behind. At least she's not Joe Biden. I mean, how is that going to drive enthusiasm like Trump is driving the enthusiasm of his base? I'm not sure that's going to be able to be matched by Kamala Harris, because you said what, there was 25,000?
That's the number that was given.
Yeah.
Yep. 25,000. Yeah. Here's the problem for Kamala Harris. She's still got to defend Joe Biden's record.
Yes.
Because Joe Biden's still in the White House during this campaign.
Right. And she's still the vice president supporting his policies.
Yes. And so, but she also has to defend her own record. And I know Chris has some audio of this. Through the years, if you go back to 2019, she began to be challenged on the fact that she was voted the worst or the most liberal senator, more liberal than Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. What's also evident, too, right now, you talk about the match of the enthusiasm of the crowds. You know who the last couple of days, she's been going to very friendly venues.
Right.
All right. She was before a black sorority group yesterday. Today, I believe she is later today, she's going to speak to a teachers union group.
Right.
All right. So you're going to hear lots of clapping, lots of hooray, hooray from that crowd. But that's not who's going to elect her.
Right.
Right now, Trump can go out and campaign on what has happened in this country in the last 3.5 years. What is she going to talk about? A little bit of a hint in Joe Biden's speech last night. He mentioned threat to democracy 6 times. All right. So
how long was his speech?
12 minutes.
He mentioned it 6 times.
6 times. So once every 2 minutes. But you see, that was a taste of what they're going to go campaign on, that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. But I don't think that's going to trump, small t, that's going to trump the message of Donald Trump, capital T.
Right.
What he can go out on and said, look what they've done to this country in the last 3.5 years. They've allowed an invasion of this country, of millions of illegals. You've got the record now of, and that's been pretty silent the last 3.5 years, of what Kamala Harris has said about universal health care, what she has said about, all these illegals, they should be allowed to stay and get all these tax benefits, the whole thing. She's totally against the fossil fuel industry, 100%. I know Chris has got some audio just to back up what I'm saying.
Right, and this is a mere taste of the entire exchange here. I have posted the entire video here on our Facebook page, so check that out in a moment.
What exchange?
It's a lengthy montage of various things that Kamala Harris has said and been asked about over the years, going back to when she was a senator running for president back in 2020. It's 90 seconds long. I could have done a lot more, but I value my job, and I know people only want to hear from Harris so much. So here's 90 seconds of what the possible future president has had to say about a number of things over the years. Clip 6.
You're considered the most liberal United States senator.
Somebody said that, and it actually was Mike Pence on the debate stage. But
yeah, well, actually, the nonpartisan GovTrack has rated you as the most liberal senator. You supported the Green New Deal. You supported Medicare for all. You've supported legalizing marijuana. Joe Biden doesn't support those things. So are you going to bring the policies, those progressive policies that you supported as senator, into a Biden administration?
what I will do, and I promise you this, and this is what Joe wants me to do, this was part of our deal. I will always share with him my lived experience as it relates to any issue that we confront.
Do you ban plastic straws?
I think we should. Yes. I think there's no question that we've got to critically re-examine ICE and its role and the way that it is being administered and the work it is doing.
So would you ban offshore drilling?
Yes. I am in favor of saying that we're not going to treat people who are undocumented across the border as criminals. That's correct. No question I'm in favor of banning fracking. For far too long, the status quo thinking has been to believe that by putting more police on the street, you're going to have more safety. And that's just wrong.
But would you support changing the dietary guidelines?
Yes.
You know, the food pyramid, what people
yes.
are
yes.
to reduce red meat specifically.
Yes, I would. I am opposed to any policy that would deny in our country any human being from access to public safety, public education, or public health, period.
She's opposed to red meat?
Yes. No barbecue
folks,
for you.
Yes. I did hear more than just that, folks, but that was particularly horrifying. Listen, that is a long list. I saw, as you were talking, Fred, on one of the news feeds, I think it was MSNBC, that Kamala Harris has released a statement condemning the graffiti. This is the protests that happened in D.C. We haven't gotten to that story yet. So she is going to try to shore up some of her weaknesses, her far leftedness. She is going to have to try to shore that up because all those kinds of things are damaging to her. But the problem for her is that the Trump campaign needs to hammer the point home. Folks, you know how bad it's been the last 4 years? Just ask yourself this. You want 4 more years of it?
Yep.
Big cities, you want 4 more years of veterans being tossed out of hotels and being given those rooms and hotel rooms to illegal immigrants, folks who have lost jobs to illegal immigrants. You want more of that? You want more of your wages crashing because companies can hire cheaper illegal immigrants to do it? Folks who have lost hospitals in rural areas because they could not keep up with the people who are demanding services that don't pay taxes. You want to lose more hospitals? That is the message the Trump campaign needs to hammer. And the reason why President Joe Biden mentioned saving democracy, I had no idea it was that many times in such a short speech, is because that is the Democratic Party's attempt to make this election about Trump.
Mm.
It's a ridiculous argument, I think, to begin with, that he's some kind of hidden dictator, when it's the Biden administration that's been dictating to schools, for example, all over the country. You got to let boys into girls' changing areas. You want to talk about dictating?
Yeah, you got to get a shot, or we're not going to send your employer money.
Yes, all those kinds of things. But it's their only real hope to divert attention from the economy / inflation, from illegal immigration, crime skyrocketing in the big cities. The only hope is to make this a referendum on Trump as a person rather than the Biden administration.
Yeah, what you heard in that montage we just played of Kamala Harris going back to 2019-20, and, you know, as Chris said, there's more to this, is it makes Joe Biden look conservative. Mm-hmm. It really does. When you listen to what she is advocating for, she would go all the way and make Obamacare the law of the land.
She wants universal health care.
Yes, universal health care, and I can talk a little bit about that. I won't today, from my experience in Canada. So it's social medicine.
Right, socialized medicine.
Yes, and she makes it sound like the greatest thing since sliced bread, but there's, listen, just go do some research on socialized medicine in the UK and what has happened there. You know,
long waiting times before you can get certain surgeries.
Yes.
Sometimes being told you can't have it.
And sometimes being
too old.
You can't go to that doctor because he's reached his quota of how many patients.
Right.
All right. All of that.
We're shutting down your hospital's emergency room because they have no more money.
They're out of money
for this month.
Kiss, any ideas of school choice goodbye?
Yes.
All right. Understand that, where she is. And she's serious when she talks about, no, we're going to cut back on people's use of beef.
Yes.
Eating beef, because that fits into the green agenda. And
Right.
she is 100% into that. If, like I say, if you thought Joe Biden was radical left, she goes on steroids.
Yeah.
I will say that Trump did mention, and this is a short clip here, Trump did get into Kamala and her support for what he calls the Green New Scam and some other stuff here. Clip 4.
She co-sponsored the $100 trillion Green New Scam with the goal of completely abolishing the oil, coal, and natural gas industries, which would reduce the United States to a third world country.
Lastly, Trump also called her a, quote, border czar, which was not a coincidence. Many people on the left are saying she was never given that title, even though she was given the idea of such a job,
Right.
czar being a person appointed to oversee something.
All right, folks, what I'm going to do here in just here a moment, I want to talk about something that AFR is doing. But I do want to let you know that after the break, which is coming up, Jan Markell, host of Understanding the Times, will be joining us. And we're going to be talking about Benjamin Netanyahu coming to this country, addressing a joint session of Congress, the protests that happened in D.C. as a result. But I do want to let you know about Hannah's Heart. Now, Hannah's Heart is a radio show heard on American Family Radio to help Christian couples struggling with infertility and miscarriage. It is hosted by our very own Ann Cockrell and Kendra White. And Hannah's Heart is launching Bibles for Babies. So Bibles for Babies is a week-long initiative to raise funds for mamas who choose life for their babies. A one-time gift of $10 will provide one new Bible for a precious new life. On the way, what better gift than God's Word for a new mama and baby to receive? So call 877-616-2396, 877-616-2396. I think this was mentioned on the show and other shows on AFR this week. You can also give online safely and securely at afr.net/Bibles for Babies, afr.net/Bibles for Babies. All right, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, Jan Markell will be joining us. We'll be talking about Benjamin Netanyahu's visit and the protests that resulted.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn,
Don Wildman.
Flying is a frightening experience for some people. For others, it's a thoroughly enjoyable experience. One reason flying is frightening for many people is that they haven't done much of it, don't know a lot about it. We humans have a natural tendency to fear that which is unknown to us. I can remember an incident that happened to me once as we were leaving Paris. The plane was climbing to its cruising altitude shortly after takeoff. Then, suddenly, the captain cut back on the power. I knew that the two most crucial times in flying were taking off and landing. The clouds were thick, and to be honest with you, I could hardly see the end of the plane's wing. I had not flown very much, and I became very scared. I was afraid something was wrong. However, after a few minutes, the captain increased the power again and climbed to the cruising altitude. A few years later, a similar incident occurred as we were leaving Atlanta on our way to New York. As we were climbing, the captain suddenly cut back on the power. We were at about 8,000 or 9,000 feet. He held this altitude for about 5 minutes. Then the plane began a slow banking turn. I leaned over to tell my brother, who was sitting next to me, that something was wrong. After a few moments, the captain announced that we had a wing flap which was not working properly and that we were going back to Atlanta. Well, we circled the airport for a few minutes, time to allow emergency vehicles on the ground to get into position. When we landed, we saw the fire engines and ambulances parked along the runway, lights flashing. The landing was near perfect, and in a few minutes a crew was working on our aircraft. But you know, during that landing, that emergency landing, I wasn't all that frightened. Had it happened during my first few flights, I would have probably died of a heart attack. What was the difference? Well, I had become accustomed to flying. I knew more about it and realized that the aircraft was under the control of an experienced pilot. My experience and knowledge had taught me that I really didn't have any reason or any major reason to be afraid. Aristotle, the wise Greek philosopher, once said that fear is pain arising from the anticipation of evil. Well, I didn't expect anything evil or bad to happen when the plane landed. I expected exactly what I got, a safe landing. It was Emerson who wrote, "Fear always springs from ignorance." You know, I believe he was right about that we fear what we don't understand. There are multitudes of people who fear God. They fear Him because they don't know Him. If they would only make an attempt to know Him, they would soon quit fearing Him and begin to love Him. Well, my fear of flying is gone. In fact, flying has become an enjoyable experience for me. The reason for this change is that I have become more knowledgeable about it. And no person has to fear God either. The more you know about Him, the more you love Him and realize how great His love is for you. And the more you love Him, the more you enjoy Him. It's a good thing for a person to turn his fear of God into love of God.
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
In Him we were also chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of Him who works out everything in conformity with the purpose of His will. Ephesians 1:11.
American Family Radio. This is Today's Issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of Today's Issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of Today's Issues.
And welcome back to Today's Issues. I do want to let you know today that if you want to watch the live video stream of this here show, there are several ways for you to do that. You can go to Facebook and you can search for Today's Issues. And on our Facebook page, Chris Woodward frequently posts the stories we're discussing, even additional links to corresponding stories and information. You can go to YouTube and search for Today's Issues Live. You can go to our own streaming platform, which is stream.afa.net, stream.afa.net, or you can go to X, formerly known as Twitter, and search for American Family Radio, and you can catch whatever program is live streaming the video. Now, I don't think every show does it. Most of the shows do, but you can catch the video stream at those locations online. All right, we want to welcome back to the program Jan Markell, well known to our listeners and much beloved, I would say, host of Understanding the Times, heard Saturday at 1 p.m. Central Time and Sunday at 12 p.m. Central Time here on American Family Radio. Jan, welcome back.
Oh, it's so nice to talk to you, gentlemen. Thank you.
Well, gentlemen, that might be a stretch, but we do appreciate the optimism.
Yes.
Hey, Jan, I'm going to turn this over to Chris here for just a couple of minutes, because as you know, Benjamin Netanyahu addressed a joint session of Congress yesterday, and at the same time, there were terrible protests occurring in D.C. And Chris, you said you had a couple of clips, and then we'll get Jan's take on what happened yesterday and what it means for Bible-believing Christians.
Yeah, speaking to legislators on all sides of the aisle, Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday got into the anti-Israel protest that he said involved students and even school leaders, and he had this to say to all of the people out there involved. Clip 8.
I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots. Some of these protesters hold up signs proclaiming gays for Gaza. They might as well hold up signs saying chickens for KFC.
That's just one.
What else? What else you got?
Yes, he also told, again, a bipartisan gathering, Israel is our home. Clip 7.
The land of Israel has been the homeland of the Jewish people. It's always been our home. It will always be our home.
It's kind of a mic drop moment there.
Yes. All right, Jan. Of course, the protesters were at Union Station. They removed the American flags flying outside that Metro Transit hub location, and they then flew Palestinian flags in their place. And I think overnight, some House Republicans swapped those back out, put the American flags back up. But they also, the protesters also spray painted and defaced nearby monuments using graffiti. That's something that Netanyahu referred to, as well as the moral blindness of those doing the protesting. So let's get your take first on the protests, and then what do you think about Netanyahu's statement about the land that Israel is on?
Well, you know, addition to what you just reported and what the media is reporting is in addition to that, these protesters set off fire alarms in the hotel all night long. This is in Netanyahu's hotel all night long. They apparently left maggots in the conference room that was set aside for the Israelis. They tried to block all the roads on the way to the capital, of course. And you know what, gentlemen, what this reminds me of is reminds me of the spirit of Antichrist. And that was unleashed on my hometown exactly 4 years ago, May, June of 2020, when the same kind of spirit rioting unleashed on Minneapolis and burned down 4 or 5 blocks, if not more, that will never come back. It's so completely decimated, it'll never come back. My only point is, this indeed is the spirit of Antichrist, and the Bible talks about that, and particularly in a last days context. And I think we need to recognize that this is sort of a last days phenomenon where evil is just unleashed all over the world, but we can't get away from it. Even in a presidential election, we're seeing this kind of evil in Israeli foreign policy. Are you kidding me? The Washington, D.C. practically melts down over Israeli policy. I mean, our one true ally in the Middle East this, in a way, it's shocking. In a way, it is not.
You know, Jan, it's really quite fascinating to see what's going on right now. Yeah, it was a bipartisan crowd, but there are at least 30 Democrats that didn't
Yeah.
show up at all. Rashida Tlaib, Democrat congresswoman from Michigan, which has a very large Muslim population, she held up a sign. I think it said "War Criminal."
War criminal.
Yeah, that's the only reason she showed up at that event yesterday. But you know, I think I was expecting a more toned down speech from Netanyahu. I'm certainly celebrating the speech that we did hear yesterday. You know, he came to the United States to shore up support because support has been kind of softening in the Biden administration for Israel.
Yes.
So I thought he might, be a little softer in the speech, but he laid it out and basically said, if you don't support us, you're doing yourself tremendous harm, United States. So he did not hold back at all. Some of the clips that we just played, he particularly went at the academic communities. Harvard president, he said, even my alma mater, MIT, he was disgusted with them. So he was blunt, and I was pleasantly surprised by the number of standing ovations he received during that speech yesterday. That was terrific.
I believe 55 ovations, and I was so encouraged to hear the enthusiasm for Bibi Netanyahu. Obviously, some, mainly on the left, sat there with arms folded and everything. Just shameful type behavior. Remember, even some 35 and 40 years ago, leftists were not like this. And back then, they tried to suggest that they were the pro-Israel party. Well, that may not have been, but they certainly were more pro-Israel back then than they are today. Something's happened over the last 30, 40, and 50 years that's driven them to become enemies of Israel, enemies of the only really free country in the whole Middle East. So nothing surprised me, but I guess I would have to say beyond disappointed in the Pelosi's and the Ilhan Omars and the Cortez, even Jamie Raskin, who I believe is Jewish, Cori Bush, of course Rashida Tlaib. They're proud of their hatred. They're not ashamed to show it and talk about it. But look, this is how America has drifted in foreign policy in just a few decades. And I think Christians need to be paying attention to this because it does have biblical implications.
Well, one of the things we heard Benjamin Netanyahu talk about is the kind of moral blindness on the part of a lot of the Palestinian protesters in this country, gays for Gaza, that kind of thing.
Yes.
Sometimes the explanation, I find this compelling, the explanation for these disparate groups coming together in their animosity towards Israel is they call it the Red-Green Alliance. Green representing Palestinians and Hamas, at least those Palestinians that support Hamas, and red being a reference to Marxism worldwide, but also here in the United States. What do you think about that? Do you think that Red-Green Alliance is a real thing?
Yes, and I talk about that this weekend on Understanding the Times Radio, and I'm interviewing Michelle Bachmann as my guest, and we're talking heavily about all the things that you and I are talking about, and we hit on the Red-Green Alliance, and nowhere is this more prominent, I have to say, sadly, than the state of Minnesota. It's that Red-Green Alliance, communism and Islam coming together and wrecking our state, but they're after wrecking it all over the country. But I think we see it more prominently here, and maybe in Michigan, but certainly in Minnesota, it's hitting us right full in the face.
So you think that, and it would be interesting to hear what Michelle Bachmann has to say about these kinds of things, but you think it's entirely possible that Islam and communism and their representatives in this country are in an alliance to take down the country, and then what? They fight between themselves when that's over?
Well, who's going to take over the country?
Yeah.
Marxism or Islam? And you know what? Maybe they'll blend in the very end. I'm not suggesting they're going to be victorious, but I mean, I think in the end they probably get along. It's hard to say because, you know, these forces are very violent, and it's very, very. I think living with it, as I have here in Minnesota, I've had to see how really ugly this is. Yes.
Well, Jan, we certainly look forward, and I encourage our listeners to tune in this weekend
Yeah,
to hear
please.
your conversation with Michelle Bachman. She's an expert on these issues, just like you are. Folks, our guest has been Jan Markell, host of Understanding the Times. You can hear this Saturday at 1 p.m. Central Time or Sunday at 12 p.m. Central Time here on American Family Radio. For past programming, by the way, you can go to afr.net, look for the drop-down menu at the top that says podcasts, and that will drop down a window, kind of a menu of shows, and you can check out Understanding the Times because Jan has all kinds of wonderful guests and talk about a lot of these issues that we discuss, but from a particularly eschatological end times biblical perspective. It's fascinating. I know personally many people who listen to the show, and Fred goes to some of the conferences.
Yep.
Folks, this is really eye-opening stuff, and you should take the opportunity provided by American Family Radio in conjunction with Jan Markell. She is very knowledgeable and has been teaching on this for a long time. Can I say decades, Jan? Is that all right to say?
Oh, you can. That's okay.
Okay. Well, I don't like to give the impression that any of us here have left the younger decades of our lives, but we have.
I'm afraid we have.
I'm sadly getting to that realization. I'm no longer the new guy. There's a young man in the newsroom that has sometimes referred to me as sir. And it's a new season of life.
Yes, it is. Well, Jan, thank you so much for being on with us again and bringing your wonderful and informative perspective for these kinds of events.
Thanks so much, gentlemen. All right. Goodbye.
That's Jan Markell, everyone. Again, check out Understanding the Times, heard on American Family Radio, Saturday at 1 p.m. Central Time and then Sunday at 12 p.m. Central Time.
You know, you talk about perspective and biblical perspective, and that's what Jan's show is all about, is looking at today's events and looking at it through the lens of Scripture, and particularly eschatology. What does this mean? What does the Bible say about end times and what we can expect? But yesterday in Netanyahu's speech, you know, he addressed those who say, you know, Israel is an occupier. You know, it's like they just arrived on the land yesterday.
Right.
And he took a moment or so to a little bit of a history lesson here. The Jews have been in that land for thousands of years.
Right.
It is the land of Abraham. It is the land of Jacob. It is the land of David and Solomon. You know, those are historic figures. Those aren't made up. And the Jews have been there because God gave them the title to that land. So for people to say, you know, we need to wipe them off the face of the earth because it belongs to the Palestinians. One other point, I thought it was very powerful at one stage in his address yesterday. He had 3 Israeli soldiers up there, including a family, a young soldier of a family who had immigrated, I think, from Ethiopia.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said another soldier who is a Muslim. A lot of people aren't aware. Not all Israeli soldiers are Jewish.
Right.
Because Israel is made up. Israel has 1 million Muslims, has Israeli citizens. And yes, they participate in the Israeli army. And this particular soldier, he was one of those that went on the scene. I think he was the Muslim soldier who ran miles to get to the front that day on October 7th when the Hamas terrorists attacked. Wow. He picked up his rifle and ran miles to get to the front to defend the Jewish people who live there. It was incredible. He also had one of the female hostages that Hamas took captive. She was there. She's one of the ones that was rescued.
Yeah.
So it was a very powerful speech. If you have a chance, You didn't see it yesterday. Go back and look at it.
Well, I'm with Jan. It's hard to believe. Look, you can have political disagreements. I understand that when a Republican president, for example, at the State of the Union is talking about his, or maybe in the future, his or her deeds, that the opposing party's not going to stand and give a standing ovation. I understand that. And same thing when there's a Democrat in the White House, Republicans don't stand up. Listen, I understand those kinds of things. That's the kind of game you expect to see in Washington, D.C. However, when you have Benjamin Netanyahu, okay, representing Israel in the Middle East after they were brutally, savagely attacked not even a year ago, and you sit on your hands, you fold your arms and refuse to get up or hold signs that say war criminal, look, that is difficult to understand from a political perspective. I will make one other comment, too, about what you were saying, Fred. The Jews have lived in that land for thousands of years, even when the government of the country had been disbanded.
Yes.
And people had been carried away into captivity or scattered, diaspora, okay, scattered around, for example, the Roman Empire and those kind of things. There were still Jews remaining in Israel.
Yes.
So, yes, the government might have been dismantled. An official state might not have existed, but the Jews were still in that land.
That's right.
So the implication that there were no Jews over the last 2,000 years, and then they all came flooding back, is just not true.
That's
not
right.
a true perspective on what has happened. And believe me, I understand, folks, for those of you that are listening, there has been a lot of suffering on the part of Palestinians, not only throughout that region, but in Gaza. But at the same time, some of that blame has to be laid at the feet of Hamas, who cared so little for the Palestinians in Gaza that they took the billions of dollars that had been given and used it to buy weapons, build tunnels, tearing up the water pipes to help with making weapons. So it seems to me that you could make a good case that Hamas itself is responsible for a great deal of that suffering. Okay. Chris,
I have more.
man.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of more clips here to play that involve the protest because my pronouns are now link and clip. So here is one from Representative Brian Mast of Florida, who had some interesting things to say about yesterday's protest and the sponsors, the people that might be behind these things. Clip 9.
Absolutely disgusted, outraged. All of America should be, and everybody should be looking at this, tying this directly to politics. I'm going to take this to politics because everybody's looking at the video of the flag burning. What they're not showing is the stage just off of this that showed the sponsors of this event. People that Donald Trump have said they need to be fired immediately. The American Auto Workers Union, lead sponsor of this event. President Trump has talked about their president extensively. American Postal Workers Union, their president spoke there, lead sponsor of the event, the ones defacing these monuments in America, hoisting tearing down the American flag, hoisting the Palestinian flags. Those are the ones sponsoring this, and they are direct supporters of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden.
If that is accurate, where do unions get their money? It's from dues and fees they force people to pay as a condition of employment, which means postal workers, you might have funded that stuff yesterday, or United Auto Workers.
Fred, I'm having a hard time figuring out why these two unions that were mentioned, who was that again?
Brian Mast of Florida.
Okay. Having a hard time figuring out why United Auto Workers and the U.S. Postal Union, why these two unions would fund this kind of protest. Is it just because, hey, we support Democrats, and if they're against something, then we're against it?
Possibly goes beyond that, and I'm just speculating at this point, because when I heard Congressman Mast say this morning, I was saying, wait a minute, I haven't heard this anywhere before. On the postal workers, I can't even speculate on that one. On the auto workers, it is possible. Michigan has some of the biggest auto plants.
Right.
Michigan also has a huge Islamic population. There may be a fairly significant percentage of workers in some of these plants that are Islamic and pro-Palestinian.
Yeah.
Rashida Tlaib, I mean, it's a very large Palestinian group that lives
Yeah.
in portions of Michigan. Maybe that is
Dearborn
yes. So Hamtramck, Michigan. So it may be that is the connection, but I haven't had time to research it.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to take at this point, we'll have to take the congressman at his word.
Yep.
Hey, here's a positive story. You know,
don't wanna hear a
Tim
positive
issued an executive order many weeks ago for me to bring in something good, so I'm going to
Yeah?
do that.
Okay.
Mr. President, if you're listening, here's the good news. Our brothers and sisters over at Samaritan's Purse are one of the many organizations out there now doing the hard work helping victims of Hurricane Beryl from Grenada to the other areas near there, even in South Texas. I'm going to give you a couple of ideas here. And by the way, do keep listening to AFR because later today we'll have sound from somebody with Samaritan's Purse on our newscasts. But it looks like Samaritan's Purse has transported dozens of personnel and more than 111 tons of relief and medical supplies to the islands aboard big aircrafts. They are assisting with shelter, clean water, other relief. They have medical teams set up treating people in field hospitals. So Samaritan's Purse continuing to do the good work there and no doubt sharing the love of Jesus with these people.
Yeah, that's one thing that we do talk about on this show periodically, Fred, and I have a great deal of respect for Samaritan's Purse and all that they not only do but are willing to do. But that Christians are, I don't want to say the only religion that does this because I'm not sure I can prove that. But as far as I know, Christians are, let me just put it this way, at least the main vehicle for helping and taking money out of their own pockets, so to speak, to support organizations like Samaritan's Purse, like 8 Days of Hope, who will go into areas that have been devastated by natural disasters and help people get through the aftermath, but oftentimes helping to rebuild as well. That is a product of the love that Christians are supposed to have and do have for their neighbor.
Yeah, it provides a tremendous opportunity. I know Samaritan's Purse often will go into areas with medical personnel.
Right.
And it's an opportunity for Christian people who are involved in the medical field, if you want to give some time up to help in these kinds of projects going into these areas. They set up in the way of mobile hospitals. We saw it during COVID. They went into New York, and they set up these tents. They now have two large airplanes, an old DC-8 and a Boeing 757, and they take whole hospital units in there, and they'll go into these areas. They feed and they take care. So if you're looking for opportunities to serve on a short-term basis, Samaritan's Purse has openings for these. They're all over the world now.
Right.
And they fly and they bring these people in for short periods, some for longer periods. So it is a terrific ministry, part of the Franklin Graham, Billy Graham Association ministry, and they just do an incredible job.
And also, folks, as I mentioned, 8 Days of Hope.
Yes.
You can also go on short-term trips to help people who have been devastated. I will note, in terms of the radical left, which puts ideology over the people they claim to care about.
Yeah.
During COVID, I remember that Samaritan's Purse was not welcome.
I know.
Either in the harbor, I think, with the ship, but then also when they set up in Central Park, there were people saying they don't need to be here simply because of what they believe about human sexuality, gender, and marriage.
Yes.
And so why you would tell people to leave just because you disagree with their worldview when people are suffering is hard to believe. All right, folks, we're going to take a 5-minute break for news. Chris Woodward, thank you, sir, for being on the program. Thank you for that good news. I'll try to remember to tell Tim, but, you know, I'm old. Sometimes I forget. Folks, we'll take a 5-minute break for news. You're listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. We hope you'll join us when we come back.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
The American Family Association, informing, equipping, and activating to transform American culture.
Jesus commissioned his disciples to make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything Jesus commanded them.
We at the American Family Association seek to aid the church in our Great Commission.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty P. President Biden gave his first Oval Office address since announcing that he is bowing out of the 2024 presidential race.
This sacred task of perfecting our union is not about me. It's about you, your families, your futures. It's about we, the people. I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. That's the best way to unite our nation.
But the GOP nominee, former President Donald Trump, said Biden never explained why he dropped out, and he called Biden's exit a coup.
Well, I think it was a coup. They didn't want him running. He was way down in the polls, and they thought he was going to lose. They went to him and they said, you can't win the race, which I think is true. And I think he was so far down, and they said, you're not going to win, and you're not in great shape, and you did poorly in the debate. I think the debate started everything. That really started the fall. I have it from very good information. I know a lot of people on the other side, too, that they went, and they forced him out between Pelosi and Obama and some others.
Louisiana Senator John Kennedy believes there are a couple of reasons why Biden dropped out.
The president, regretfully, can't finish a sentence without taking a nap. And number two, he was about to get beat. He was polling right up there with cholera. Now, I respect President Biden when he said, I won't get out of this race unless God tells me. And I'm a Christian, maybe God talked to him. But I think it's equally probable that God's voice sounded suspiciously like Barack Obama's, who told President Biden if he didn't get out and let Vice President Harris run, that President Barack Obama was going to destroy President Biden. In Washington, sometimes your friends are more dangerous than your enemies.
Former President Donald Trump says he supports a jail sentence for those caught burning a U.S. flag. Demonstrations took place across Washington, D.C., protesting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit and address to Congress, with some protesters burning U.S. flags in the process.
You should get a 1-year jail sentence if you do anything to desecrate the American flag. Now, people will say, oh, it's unconstitutional. Those are stupid people. Those are stupid people that say that. We have to work in Congress to get a 1-year jail sentence when they're allowed to stomp on the flag and put lighter fluid on the flag and set it afire.
Speculation on exactly what happened with the president of the Southern Baptist Convention's Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission's apparent firing and then reinstatement continues. More from Steve Jordahl.
Monday night, the chairman of the ERLC Executive Committee fired Commission President Brent Leatherwood. The next morning, the ERLC press office issued a retraction. Instead, Executive Committee Chairman Kevin Smith was stepping down. There's not been a lot of explanations forthcoming, but Daily Wire reporter Megan Basham told Jenna Ellis in the morning on AFR that there had been trouble brewing for a while.
Leatherwood has very much carried on the tradition of Russell Moore taking policy positions in the name of Southern Baptists that many Southern Baptists do not support. Things like lax border policies, gun control measures.
Smith and one other executive committee member were upset that Leatherwood had represented Joe Biden being forced out of the presidential race as something heroic and self-sacrificial. It wasn't, of course, but Basham says the ERLC gave in to public criticism.
That was walked back following widespread outrage from Russell Moore. And this is interesting. A whole bunch of media figures who are not Southern Baptists, not even Christians, many of them.
Basham notes that at the recent SBC convention, 40% of messengers voted to completely do away with the ERLC. She says it's lost its way.
The ERLC has become an entity that rather than representing the interests of Southern Baptists to, say, Washington, D.C. or the media, as it was designed to do, what it now does is represent the interests of Washington, D.C. and the media to Southern Baptists.
I'm Steve Jordahl.
American Family News is available online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Interested in seminary but don't think it will work in this season in life? Wesley Biblical Seminary offers flexible options that allow you to take classes live, no matter where you are. At WBS, we don't just educate people, we develop trusted leaders for faithful churches. It's time for you to respond to the calling God has on your life. Take classes from an institution that you can trust for a calling that will not go away. Learn more about your opportunities at wbs.edu. That's wbs.edu.
Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And welcome back to Today's Issues. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman this week. I'm joined in studio by Fred Jackson, and now Steve Paisley-Jordahl has joined us.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, everybody.
Yeah. Steve, you look very bright.
Yeah,
I'm not talking necessarily about intellect. I'm talking about your shirt.
Yeah, this is my shirt of many colors. Chris tried to sell me into slavery today. I got here. Threw me in a pit, but I climbed out. I'm good to go.
You climbed out. Okay, so folks, if you don't get the obvious Bible reference, just go to the book of Genesis.
There you go.
You'll see what Steve is talking about. All right, Steve.
What's
cooking?
It has not been a very auspicious start in Paris. So the Olympics officially open on Friday, tomorrow night, but a lot of the tournament type things like tennis and soccer particularly have already started, some of the matches. And very first match, Argentina-Morocco, had to be delayed for 2 hours as fans protested a goal that was allowed and threw stuff on the field, and they had to take the teams off the field and everything. So there's a big scandal about that.
This is soccer chaos?
Soccer chaos.
I'm shocked.
In Europe, soccer chaos.
Yeah,
and already two teams, the Argentine soccer team and the Australian Olympic cycling team, their equipment has been stolen. Someone broke into the vans that they were using one of them took off with a lot of stuff, including a massage table that the team brings with them so they can,
for injuries.
Yeah.
So this is in Paris?
Yes.
Wow. So both of those have had their equipment stolen.
Yep.
I can't. Listen, it's always infuriating to have something stolen. That's only happened to me once that I can think of my whole life. It's frustrating, it's infuriating. But if you've practiced for years for the Olympics and now maybe won't be able to participate because some thief broke into your van, that's
terrible.
There's
nothing that says they're probably able to participate. They just have to, maybe find some new uniforms or whatever else was stolen at this point. Now, I got to tell you,
right? You said bikes too.
The cycling team.
Oh, cycling team.
I don't know that the bikes were stolen.
Okay. All right. That's so. Okay, I see what you're
Australian
saying.
Olympic cycling team fell victim to theft in Paris. Cyclist Logan Martin revealed the thieves smashed the passenger seat window of their van. They not only stole a wallet, but also made off with various equipment, including a physiotherapist's massage table.
All right. I misunderstood what you were saying. That's not quite the catastrophe I was thinking. But still.
Okay. So. Speaking of, I got to say this is what we talk about. This is not a good start, but it's not tragic. I saw across my Twitter feed came a video that Hamas put out, and they're threatening to blow up the Olympics, literally, because they're allowing Jews to compete and everything,
Right.
and they punctuated the video with the guy holding up a severed head, a real live severed head.
Well, a real severed head from I'm not trying to be funny. From a once living person.
Yeah, they had killed and taken the head off, and he just So
the religion of peace.
Well, and I'm just saying, I'm a little nervous about what's going on in Paris these days. It's just this world is on edge right now. America's not the only place that is having tensions. Certainly in France, the Muslim conflicts that are going on.
Fred, some of our younger listeners might not remember this, but we three older people, we remember the 1972 Olympics in Munich, Germany.
Yeah, what happened with the Jewish team there?
Yeah.
And Steve
Executed some.
Yes, Steve is exactly right. I'm nervous about what could happen given the tensions. There have been tensions for years, and I'm talking recent years, between the Muslim population in Paris, which is quite significant. They do noon prayers. They shut down a whole area of the city in Paris. And Paris police are reluctant to go in there. We've had Islamic terrorist activity in France in recent years. And I know the Jewish team, knowing how Israel protects its people, the security will be excellent.
They're not using the Secret Service, I can tell you that.
Yes. So, yeah, I'll be glad when the athletes go safely home.
Yeah.
Because I think it's just Paris, unfortunately, is a very vulnerable area.
It
well,
is.
and I'm just looking. I just Googled, so I don't have a lot of time to get any more specifics than what I'm about to say. But Muslims make up 10 to 15% of Paris and the metropolitan area, so some of the suburbs and stuff outside of Paris. 10 to 15% of the area's population, and that comes to, number-wise, 1.7 million Muslims. So let me just say this. Obviously, none of us here believes that all those Muslims, 1.7 million, are terrorists.
No.
But 1.7 million, you can take
0.5%.
3% or 0.5% of that, and you've got an awful lot of people who could do an awful lot of damage.
And they're just as upset about what's going on in Israel and Gaza right now as anybody here, too.
Right.
So tensions again.
Yes, you're talking about the protesters in D.C.
The protesters in D.C., which we can, if you haven't already talked about, I think you have, but those kind of protests are going on around the world.
Yeah. All right, so good point. I'm with you guys. I'm with you fellers. I am nervous about the Paris Olympics. Let me just say this one thing, and then we'll move on. A lot of times, in a lot of years, when the Olympics, it's every 4 years, summer and then winter. They're on a staggered schedule, but there's always some tension somewhere, and we always seem to be. The world is always seems to be able to get through with the Olympics without much in the way of the political tensions boiling over at the Olympics. I'm not so sure we'll get away with it this year because the tensions are that high. So listen, folks, pray, because these are innocent, for the most part, I'm sure, innocent young people who have nothing to do with whatever's making people angry on either side of issues X, Y, and Z. They just want to perform and do well for their country. So we don't want anything to happen to any of them, the Jewish athletes, Muslim athletes, everyone in between.
Yeah.
All right. Go ahead.
All right. So we have our first session of Congress since Kamala Harris has been anointed the the presumptive nominee of the Democrat Party, and Republicans they introduced a measure to condemn Kamala Harris for her border czar role. Now, that's a political move. I'm sure that they just wanted to get on the record and point out her terrible record down there. But you know what's interesting? 6 Democrats voted along with all the Republicans.
These are Democrats in areas that have been hit hard.
Some. Representative Jared Golden of Maine. So I don't know how hard Maine has been hit.
Wow, that's interesting.
Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez of Washington. Mary Peltola of Alaska. Henry Cuellar of Texas. Don Davis of North Carolina. And Yadira Cabrero of Colorado.
Well, I know Cuellar is there on the border, his district. I am surprised. You got Alaska, you got Washington, you got Maine.
This
is interesting.
Alaska's a red state. North Carolina is also kind of a red state. I'm betting Washington isn't, but I'm betting these are competitive districts.
But, Texas Governor Abbott has made a good point early on in all of this. Every American city is now a border town.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true.
because the impact of the Biden administration, I mean, the count, and you wonder sometimes of the numbers you hear, but you're talking about numbers of 15 to 20 million have crossed our southern border in the last
Maybe more.
And maybe more
Yeah.
in the last 3.5 years. And we have seen stories of what it's meant to cities like Chicago and New York, etc. Denver also impacted by this. And it's not good. I mean, that's why you have complaints from people who say they vote Democrat all the time, upset with what's going on.
Right.
You know, this is going to be a huge, huge election issue.
Yeah.
And Kamala Harris may try to skate away from the title of border czar. But I saw a video this morning. This goes back to, would be 20 or 21, I guess it would be. Yeah, 21, where Joe Biden, wearing a mask, made the announcement that he was so proud that he was giving Kamala Harris the job of looking after what's going on the border. And I think we talked about this earlier in the week, they're fighting this title now of border czar. But what is a czar? It's not just a leader somewhere in the world. A czar is a title given to someone who is given a responsibility.
Right.
John Kerry is the climate czar.
Yes.
For Joe Biden. She was given the task of dealing with what's going on at the border. She deserves that title, and I think Donald Trump will make her wear it.
She never complained about it before.
No, she did not.
Democrats never complained about her being the quote-unquote border czar.
Yes.
Nobody said it was an official title.
No.
It's not, it's not a paid position, in an appropriations bill, but she's never complained about it before.
Yes.
And neither have the Democrats. So
just for a second, let's give them that point. Let's say that she was only appointed to go down and investigate root causes down in Guatemala and wherever, and she wasn't tasked with stopping or figuring out how to stop illegal crossers. What does that say about the Democrat Party's concern with the actual border?
Yes. Why wouldn't you appoint
Why wouldn't you have someone?
Border czar.
Someone's going to have to go down there and figure out how to stop the 2 million people from crossing.
The problem for the Democrats is that Joe Biden didn't want anything done with the border.
That's right.
So they made it look like this is Kamala Harris's task because she wasn't doing anything anyway. All right. She would give speeches sometimes and irritate people with her word salads and her cackling. Okay. And it is irritating. I'm sorry. So she wasn't doing anything politically important. So he gave her a job.
Yeah.
All right. But the problem for the Biden administration and the problem for Kamala Harris, who's fully supportive of Biden's policies and his decision not to do anything on the border, the problem is Americans don't like it.
No.
They don't like the policy, and they don't like the fact that Kamala Harris did nothing while she had at least the opportunity to do something or to speak out against it. And now they're trying to walk all that back.
Well,
so I would ask if you had a fair media and who did their jobs, I would ask Kamala Harris, okay, let's say we grant you, to Steve's point, the fact that you were not the border czar. Do you agree with President Biden's policies? And what do you think we should do? If you disagree with his policy, if you agree with his policies, then you're Joe Biden 2.0. If you disagree with his policies, what would you do, Kamala Harris, to reverse the damage done by the policies you now disagree with?
Well, we heard a clip of Kamala Harris a short time ago where she said, Joe Biden hired me to be the vice president, appointed me to be the vice president, and I made a deal with him.
Yeah.
That I would tell him how I feel about things. So if you're against what happened in the first 3 years of the Biden presidency, did you tell Joe Biden, hey, listen, I think it's a disaster at the border. We need to do something about it. But she didn't do that. Here's the other thing. Fox News has been airing this interview that NBC did with Kamala Harris. I think it's back 2 years ago. Madam Vice President, you haven't been to the border. And this is your responsibility. She said, we've been to the border. And the comeback from NBC was, but you haven't been to the border.
Right.
And what did she respond? Well, I haven't been to Europe either. And then she cackled.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that's, it's going to come back to bite her. I hope NBC reminds her of that interview. I doubt it. But
So the discussion that I'm hearing going on now in Republican circles is how do they prosecute this election now? Because if you make it about the cackle and the silliness and the lack of intelligence, you're attacking a woman. That's probably not going to go well.
No, you're right.
If it's a referendum on Donald Trump, the felon and the convictions and everything, that's probably not going to go well for Republicans. They need to attack the record.
Oh,
absolutely.
She's attached, and if they I hope they're listening. If you're listening, Mitch and folks, attack the record because there's a lot of meat there.
Well, we said in the last segment that the message should be pounded home. Are you happy with your life the last 4 years? And would you like another 4-year helping of what you've been going through for the 4 years? That should be the message in all of its permutations going forward. And you're exactly right. We can make fun of the cackle. Fox News can make fun of leave that to us. Yes, it is irritating. Look, there's a lot of things about me that are irritating. You just take that as it comes. But President Trump, if he can maintain the self-discipline he showed in that debate against Joe Biden, which sank the Biden nomination process, if he can maintain that kind of self-discipline in whatever debates or political confrontations he has with Kamala Harris, and then hammer the record, as you're saying, Steve, I think he comes out on top.
Yeah.
But you do not want to say Kamala Harris the bird brain like he did.
Or cackling Kamala. I'm not giving you an idea, Donald.
Right. He's probably going to say cackling Kamala along the way, but that should not be the focus of his message. Anyway.
All right. We continue to see the fallout from the assassination attempt at Donald Trump, and the Republicans in Congress want to put together a blue ribbon panel. They want it to be bipartisan to investigate what happened. We've already seen both the former head of the Secret Service and the FBI director, Christopher Wray, up on the Hill. Wray was on the Hill yesterday, but they want to put this blue ribbon panel together to investigate the assassination attempt, and Republicans are saying we'll do anybody except for Mississippi Representative Benny Thompson. Why, you ask? Because Mississippi Congressman Benny Thompson introduced a measure that would strip Donald Trump of his Secret Service protection were he to end up in jail.
Now, I'm not defending Benny Thompson, who's very liberal on a lot of issues.
Right.
This measure he put forward was before the assassination.
Oh, yes. Yes, it was, but.
Oh, no, it doesn't remove responsibility, but I want to make sure it's clear that he didn't do this in the wake of it.
Listen to Cut 13.
When you break the law, if there are some benefits that you are receiving before you are convicted, you lose those benefits. As you know, all former presidents receive Secret Service protection. So that's a given.
Republicans have made a lot of hay about the bill, saying it's about former President Trump and would take away his security. That just is not true. If you read it, it says you have to be a convicted felon and sentenced. Now, we're not there. The conjecture, you can do whatever you want.
Talk about disingenuous.
Fred, that's just not
that
true.
Dog ain't gonna hunt.
That's a ridiculous argument. Benny Thompson, Congressman Thompson, proposed the measure to get Trump.
Of course he
did. That's what he was trying to do. Second of all, I would say this is absolutely dangerous because what it allows a political party to do is, first step, drum up some charge, prosecute your political opponent in a city like Manhattan, okay, where you're sure to get a conviction.
Yes.
Then you strip your political opponent of protections like the Secret Service, letting them fall prey to any whack job with an AR-15.
Yeah, it's you're right. I mean, Benny Thompson introduced this before the attempted assassination of former President Trump. But you're exactly right. If anybody's in any doubt that he was aiming this at Donald Trump, think again. Benny Thompson chaired the so-called January 6th Commission.
Right.
And we all know the measures that were taken for that commission to be all one-sided.
Right.
Evidence that would have helped former President Trump was just dismissed.
Yes.
They
two Republicans on the panel, both never Trumpers.
Yes. And Pelosi appointed them personally.
Yes,
the Republicans wanted to put Jim Johnson, Jim Jordan, and Jim Banks.
Yeah, and usually for those kinds of commissions, the political head of the opposition party appoints who they want.
Yes.
Well, Nancy Pelosi said, no, we're not doing it that way this time.
Yeah, and they didn't allow any witnesses that were for Mr. Trump.
Right.
They only had witnesses come in. You talk about definition of kangaroo court.
Right.
But that was Benny Thompson's circus.
Yes.
And so any doubt that he was pointing this legislation at Donald Trump, I should go away immediately.
Yeah. And listen, I say this with the understanding that the day may come when a Democrat would fall victim to this measure.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care if a former president has been convicted, you still need to protect them because we are at that point honoring the office.
Yes.
And you don't want former presidents being gunned down in the street because they were found to be guilty of something. It's just not good for our republic. All right, Steve.
All right, let's do something a little different, a little fun. I got a test for you. So this is a test that was given several years ago. It was given to leading college seniors of the 55 leading colleges. It's a civics test. They did not fare very well, at least back when the test was given. But I want to ask you guys.
Oh, no.
So, Fred, you have a little bit of we're going to give you grace because you're Canadian. You might not know all these things.
So this is to talk about a kangaroo court.
Yeah.
Yes.
You're coming after me.
All right, question
All right,
number
don't
one. Can you name the 5 freedoms that are offered in the First Amendment?
Freedom of speech,
religion,
freedom of religion, the freedom to petition the government for redress of grievances, freedom of assembly. Did I say freedom of the press?
You didn't, but that was the 5th one.
All right.
That was the 5th one. Yeah.
Very good. All right, who's the father of the Constitution?
James Madison. Are you wanting Fred to jump in here? Or
Yes,
just
Fred
me?
can jump in
Oh,
here.
okay. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Which of the following is required for ratification? What is required for ratification of a proposed amendment to the United States Constitution?
Agreement of all the states.
So 2/3. Okay, I always get this backwards. So there's 3/4 and 2/3. 2/3 of Congress and 3/4 of the states.
Okay.
Did I get that right?
Yeah. 2/3 vote from the Senate and the House, and then a ratification by 3/4.
3/4.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Fred, the purpose of the authors of the Federalist Papers. What was the purpose of the Federalist Papers?
To get an A grade.
Oh, yeah. Very good. From the Federalist teachers.
to encourage the states to ratify it.
The Constitution.
Constitution, right.
Very good. What is the source of the phrase government of the people, by the people, for the people?
It's in the you talking about the preamble?
I'm asking you. You asking me?
It's in the preamble of the Constitution.
You're saying the source.
The source.
Oh, the source.
Where did it start?
The individual? Are you going back that far?
No, I'm just. You can answer it.
I don't know.
Gettysburg Address.
Oh, I was thinking. We the people.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. Well, we were talking about the No, you're right. We were just talking about civics. All right. You got me on that one.
How did you do, Steve?
I had the answers, so I did 100%.
Well, for being put on the spot, all right, name the 10 Commandments in order.
Thou shalt not lie.
It's not in order.
Okay. Of other gods before me and all the rest of them.
Yeah, have no other gods before me, make no graven image, don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain, honor the Sabbath, keep it holy, honor your mother and father, no murder, no adultery, no lying, no stealing, no lying, no coveting. How's that?
That's pretty good.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
It's in my translation. See you tomorrow, folks.